Hi, I'm Arcane Intuitive and welcome to my channel. On this channel, we use tarot to look at celeb culture, pop culture, spirituality, and things that are playing out in the world stage. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different and have a deep dive into what's going on between the US and the current tensions in the Middle East. So we'll use tarot as a way to look at the hidden motives and power plays that are happening in this drama on the world stage at the moment and how this might be shaping American alliances. If you haven't already, please do share, like, and subscribe and hit the red bell so that you get notifications when there's a new video. Okay, so let's start actually by just looking at the energy between the US and the Middle East at the moment. So I'm recording this of the 28th of June 2025. So at this stage, the US has had some intervention, but minimal just yet. I'm going to see what's coming in over the next while. So at the moment things have settled down slightly, but yes, just feed into the energy between the US and the Middle East currently. So immediately you're getting this very clear idea of whatever we're seeing play out at the moment as spectators might not be the full truth of what's happening. So we've got deceit coming through here, and that's really aligned with how I'm feeling about this situation. So regardless of what comes through in these cards, I do feel that what we're seeing right now is maybe some misrepresentation. There will be things happening behind the scenes that we might not be privy to at this point in time. Some of it might come through in the tarot, but to me, it feels like we're seeing a lot of things play out on the world stage that are very complex, and there are a lot of different relationships feeding into this. There's what we're seeing explicitly between a variety of countries, but also conversations that are going on behind the scenes. So there's a disconnect between what we have an understanding about and what's really occurring in the background. Conversations behind the scenes. So let's look at tarot itself for a little bit more guidance on that current energy between the US and the Middle East. So choice is coming through as a major factor in this. There are decisions that are being made. I think everyone involved sort of has their perception of what's happening and they want to stick to that very firmly. So we do have this stalemate at the moment, and that makes sense because we're at a pause, at least in terms of what we're seeing as outward action between these different countries. But there's a reflection here. A lot of the players within this are dissatisfied with how things are right now. So what's transpired and what is transpiring, they're less than happy with, and they're probably using this little bit of a pause that we're seeing at the moment in order to kind of recalibrate and make those key decisions on what they want to happen next. No one here is really releasing control or backing down as far as I can see. Let's draw a couple more cards just on that energy. What I will say, there are players within this who are actually satisfied with the fact that it is playing out and escalating in this way that it has been so far. So yeah, there are people, I would say, benefiting. I don't know if it's necessarily the politicians or the governments themselves, but there are other parties playing into this, maybe beneficiaries. I don't want to be saying too much on this, and just to be very clear, this is all alleged for entertainment purposes only. But what I will say is, when there's talk of war, when there's machinations of war, there are certain industries that benefit from that, and I do feel the presence of that here already. Maybe within the US, some of these industries are seeing, yes, like a prize that would come from this conflict. Just feel kind of capitalist. You can assume the type of beneficiaries in a context like this, right? So behind the scenes, there's money passing back and forth between people as this situation is transpiring. That's what I will say. Maybe there are certain departments, even within the Defense Force, that benefit from some of this, with the Justice card there. But yes, but I guess my understanding is there is a lot at play here. So there's the energy between those different countries going back and forth at the moment, feeling quite transactional, but there are also sort of transactional parties within the US that are looking at this and looking at how it might play out if this was to escalate any further. And they certainly have vested interests in it at the moment. Conversations perhaps going on behind the scenes. So this kind of like stalemate period we're at the moment is being utilized by these people. Okay, so energetics, I think we'll look at between Israel and Iran at the moment. So energies between those two countries. Because there's definitely defensiveness here. There might be a spark of conversation happening right now. And so we see these kind of like key players. There are a number of key players that are maybe having some discourse right now around how to, not fantastically developed, not the most productive conversations, but there's certainly like a little spark of something here in the background that's occurring at this moment, this particular moment in time as I'm reading this. It does feel like maybe it's not going to be that productive, or it is a little bit toxic, or people are doubling down on historic conflicts, so things that are influencing what's happening right now do feel historic. They do feel karmic. So these countries have ongoing relationships that are a factor within this. So there's a lot that feels like it's at play, and it's influencing what is transpiring at this point in time between the countries. It does feel like definitely toxic energy between them. I don't know how much resolution you can have in a dynamic like this. Definitely very suspicious of one another, I would say, as well. I want to actually look within that at how the US's interventions influencing that energy between them. I would say that these two countries are probably worse off for the intervention of the US in this. There's a lot of strategy and a lot of what we aren't seeing behind the scenes here influencing. So it feels like manipulation here. I mean, the US within this feels inexperienced. I'm not saying they are in general, but you know, there's something here about being rash, about kind of like cutting through what's happening between them that is not maybe productive, or maybe isn't in everybody's best interest. So the US is coming through here as kind of immature in its understanding of what's going on. It could also be creating a little bit more stress between the two countries. We know that the US was maybe impulsive by going in and these strikes that have happened. So I wanted to see how that's influencing other alliances with the US. So they've made kind of sudden action on this issue. They do have a lot of other countries that they share ongoing alliances with. How's maybe to look initially, how's this influencing the relationship with the UK, for instance? Very up and down with the UK, actually. So I do think that the players that are in power at this point in time do want to kind of support the US in this, and I do think that the US is giving them a certain amount of information about what they're doing. They are happy to kind of be involved with it, those people at the top right now, but I will say a lot of the rest of the UK government can see the danger in this. So not everybody there is going to be on board with the UK supporting the US in this, and maybe also as if they were to at some point be considered to be involved. There's a kind of dissatisfaction here. I do think a lot of politicians in the UK are looking back at what happened in Iraq and how that was misrepresented to the public and the damage that did, and those figures will not want anything to kind of move ahead here. Doesn't mean that it won't, because we're getting the base of the deck kind of like rash behavior here. Let's just look a little bit closer. UK's government's energy towards the US on this. I mean, they don't want to, so as I say again, those that are in power at this point in time, they have a lot of shared resources. They have a really established relationship with the US. They don't want to deviate from that and deviate from the status quo with the US, because they understand that that would cause them issues elsewhere. So I do feel like they could potentially be agreeable. Certainly the likes of Keir Starmer right now, who's, as long as he's in power, he's going to be agreeable with the US regardless of what they're doing in the Middle East. Can we look at France, please? Because France does influence a lot of the rest of Europe. What's their energy towards America right now? I mean, again, there's probably conversations happening, I would say, between France and the US regarding this, and there is like a spark of inspiration. They might be sharing some ideas and some insights with them at this point in time. It does look overall like relatively harmonious. They might feel that they've been a bit impulsive in a way, or that they're okay. I think from the perspective of the likes of Macron, maybe they're seeing it the US intervening in the Middle East at this point in time is maybe Trump kind of trying to establish himself as a kingmaker. Like, I think that's a term. Like, he's maybe using this war or his just, whether it's a war or a conflict, to set himself up as like a figurehead or to establish his reputation. So France are kind of looking at it like that. They're keeping him on side, but they definitely feel like he wants to play out something dramatic on the world stage in his foreign policy to gain attention publicly and to sort of create a legacy or a memory, I guess, for the ages in terms of what he's delivered in foreign policy in his presidency. That's how France are viewing it. Doesn't mean they're going to go against him. I mean, actually, they probably deep down sort of feel like it's a losing battle, but I don't think they'll be seen to be too outwardly critical of him right now, certainly at this point in time. I might just look a little bit longer term, France's perspective on this. I mean, it's a bit different behind the scenes from what they might say publicly. Yeah, there might be a bit of debate going on, but that won't be presented to the public. Okay, let's look at Australia is another kind of Western superpower that's going to be engaging with this. What's their feeling on Trump in the Middle East? I mean, they would like him just to kind of abort the whole thing, like deep down, to sort of end this. But again, they, I think, see this as him nurturing something in the background. So they dislike it. I don't think they're going to really say a whole lot on it publicly, but it might be implicit. Definitely behind the scenes in Australia, they feel like his involvement in this is kind of a risk for a lot of other nations. Are we really going to see that being said publicly? No, but to me, they'd love it if he could just cut the whole thing and move away from it at this point in time. I don't know, we'll really see that. They're also a little bit shut out, I would say. So it feels like they were maybe caught off guard, and I think it's the case with a lot of countries maybe being caught off guard by Trump's actions in Iran recently. Okay, so yeah, the cards are just kind of clarifying that they're feeling maybe it just hierarchically they're not getting much communication, I would say, from the US. So maybe the US is communicating with some countries about what it's doing. Again, anyone that it is communicating with in other Western countries, they are receiving a limited amount of information, in my opinion. And again, it's all alleged, but everyone's getting limited amount, but certainly maybe someone like Australia isn't receiving prior warning of a lot of this. And so there is kind of dissatisfaction with that, or maybe just feeling caught off guard by some of this. So how is this influencing the US global perspective and its reputation going forward? So that's partly as well public perception. How is this going to, how's the involvement in here? I mean, it feels like a loss. It is a loss in terms of And it does give the impression of kind of dictatorship energy, of resistance, of being kind of malleable or unable to negotiate. It is putting attention on those in power. Again, it's like, I think moving forward, they're going to be seen as unable to come up with kind of creative solutions or to negotiate or to navigate. Like, would there have been other ways that this could have been handled? And I do think that might be something that will come up at some point. Like, there might be an investigation, but an examination of how some of these decisions were made, the level of information that was available at the time, and whether some of these decisions were best placed decisions. As part of that, whether all the information was available or made available to those people making decisions. Again, it sort of feels, as we're talking about this, that a lot of the cards that I'm seeing coming through, the Queen of Swords, the Justice card, the Hierophant, are indicating, and it could be much later, but just an examination into how procedure was followed before action was taken in those strikes against Iran. Let's see what more, how's this being interpreted globally. We're seeing this kind of toxicity, ego. It feels like with the Death card and the Devil card coming out simultaneously, that ego was a factor in some of the actions that they've been taking of late. Okay, let's see what's coming in with this. More in the medium to longer term. So what's coming next in this issue between the U.S. and Israel and Iran? I mean, ideally, actually, the Americans probably would like to come out of this sort of ceasefire, like essentially resolve things fully between those countries and come out of it sort of harmonious, so that they can look like arbiters, like who've enabled peace. But there's potentially more to this situation. That's their intention with this. So I actually don't think they're really wanting to run and make any fast moves. Not to say that they won't do it, but I think that's what they're hopeful of. What is really going to come in, though? What's really going to come in? Okay, there's a figure here, and I don't know if this is in the US. I feel like it might be one of these other countries. It might be Israel. It might be Iran. There's a male here who's going to end up being pushed out of the role that he's currently in. This all feels like it's happening behind the scenes. This is going to represent, I think, a shift in the dynamic. So this, it might even just be an individual, it might be like a system or a regime or whatever, but it just feels like a figure, or it feels like a figure more than anything, but it could just be a military figure, something like that, will be removed from power or checked in some way that will create a sort of shift in the dynamic. But it feels like all kind of covert behind the scenes at the moment. And a secret with this leader coming through at the base of the deck. What's coming in between the US and the Middle East, please? I think there will eventually be a shift towards more harmony, or it's certainly something that is, we've got the Two of Pentacles, so it could be something that's being toyed with rather than coming in. We do still have like a tendency to behave rashly, and to behave rashly behind closed doors. So it might not be like, what plays out next might not be something that's very visible on the world stage. It might be behind the scenes. So let's look at the US upcoming energy towards Israel, and then rather than just the Middle East in general. So attitude towards Israel. Again, Israel's coming through with this kind of strong shift. So something here that changes, that shifts how the US communicates with Israel here. Again, it still feels like then there's something they might provide to Israel. I think this could be like either like just an assistance or something practical, like a sharing of resources to Israel coming in here. A little bit more on this. Whatever is coming in, again, there's going to be a little bit of a stall here. And then that sharing of resources will become known. And it might not be something very like positive that they are offering them, at least in the public's opinion. Again, I keep getting a King of Cups through, so I don't know what kind of those military leaders in Israel have as like zodiac signs, but it does feel like someone in this could be a water sign male. But you know of like military leader or their prime minister or something having that placement, please do let me know in the comments. It does feel like a little quid pro quo between the US and Israel right now. So it's a little like, I will help you and you will help me and we will owe each other things and you might call in some favors later. So I'm not really sure like what that might be relating to, or if there's anything there, but definitely feel like there's this kind of power play going on behind the scenes. Okay, let's look at the US and Iran moving forward. Okay, there could be a retreat here in time, so maybe like a bit of a shift away that feels a bit more harmonious. I don't know if the US is going to take any like very decisive action against Iran at the moment. Although, let's have a look at whether they'll take any additional strikes. What I will say, there's kind of a liability in this. So if it's in his benefit to make another move, then perhaps, but yeah, it doesn't feel like it's taking kind of the traditional route that you would expect, where if you're becoming involved in a military scenario, you have all of the approvals and everything in place from the government more generally. So I know in the US, obviously there are ways in which permission for foreign intervention would move through the Senate. If he does anything, it's more on his own head, I guess, right? It's not following protocol. But again, it comes back to, I think he views his relationship with Israel in this transactional way. So something, I help you, you help me, I will call upon that favor, and it feels like that more than anything else. So it might be harmonious moving forward with Iran, but that, I think he's an unknown element, and that kind of transactional nature. So to me, it feels like what happens with Israel. If Israel was to have like a shift in power, then a lot of this might dissipate. I will say there'll probably be a challenge within Israel for who is in power. Whether that's explicit or it's something that's happening behind the scenes, I think the outcome of what happens next is sort of dependent on that variable. Anything else wanting to come through? I guess this is just really a reminder that this is playing out. The energy, it does feel immature, and it does feel manipulative. And what happens, it just might not follow kind of the protocol that we have for these types of situations. It's very up and down. So I guess we are seeing the government here and the status quo, but some of this feels like inconsistent energy, or feels like unpredictable energies, and impulsive energies. Okay, I don't know if that was very useful at all, but that's just where we're at today. It's all alleged for entertainment purposes only. I feel like the energy around this is very changeable. And with Tarot, we're reading where we're at this point in time. So that's kind of where we're at as of today, and dependent on decisions that are being made in power, that will reflect on what happens next. So let's hope that we see some harmony in the Middle East. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you being here. Do leave me any comments that you have on what to read on next, or if any of this kind of made sense to you that maybe didn't necessarily make sense to me in the moment. That would be amazing to hear your thoughts on. Please do come back to the channel, and I'll see you again soon.